Hello everyone. Today we will discuss one of the most important and interesting topic from world's history, and that is who discovered America. You might have learned in school or college like me that America was discovered by Columbus. So today we will discuss this untold story of the discovery of America, whether it was discovered by Columbus or was it discovered by the Viking? So let's learn this fascinating, untold story of the discovery of America. Who discovered America? Columbus or the Viking? So today we embark on a fascinating journey into one of the history's most enduring question. And it's very controversial. Because I myself, when I was teacher, right, somewhere like 15 or 20 years ago, I taught to students from a book that was Oxford publication that America was for the first time discovered by Columbus. Right? Later on, I got known that it wasn't Columbus. Before the arrival of Columbus, almost 4 or 4.5 centuries before, some people arrived here and they were the Viking, right? So, who truly discovered America? Was it Christopher Columbus in 1492? And most of us were taught in school, or were there earlier explorer like the Viking in almost 1000s, right? Like the Viking who reached America centuries before Columbus set sail. So we will learn that why our history books and why historians they emphasize that it was Columbus who discovered America. And why, that the names of the Viking, they have been swiped away from the history, right? So this question has captivated historians, researchers, and enthusiasts for centuries. The story of the discovery of America is far more complex than a simple matter of who sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Because we know that in 1492 it was the end of 15th century when for the first time Columbus was sponsored by Spanish and he reached America. He died without knowing that he discovered America, or he reached the shores of America, Caribbean or Central America. So to understand the real history of America's discovery, we must consider not only the fact, but also the context, the motivations, and the lasting impact of these early voyages. So we might say that the impacts of the Viking on America or North America, where they reached for the first time, it might not be lasting like Columbus, because when Columbus arrived, so then people, countries from all over the Europe, they arrived to America and they settled in North America, Central America, South America, and they made colonies there. Spanish colonies, French colonies, we see English colonies. So they made colonies. That's why that we say the impacts of the Columbus, was lasting on this North and South American continent. That's why that historians, they tell us the story that it was discovered by Columbus rather than the Viking. Even Viking, they reached America, North America in 1000s, right? Or the beginning of 11th century, right? But they did not stay there for long, right? And they did not make colonies there. So that's why they have been swiped away from the history, and we know that Columbus discovered America. Now, by the end of this lecture, you will not only gain a deeper understanding of the historical fact, but also see how this story, perhaps our understanding of explorations, interactions between culture, and the shaping of modern world. So this is the objective summary of this lecture that we are going to discuss today. The myth of Columbus discovering America. For centuries, we have been taught that Christopher Columbus was the first European to discover America. His famous voyage in 1492, sponsored by Spain, is often considered the moment that opened up the Western Hemisphere to European explorations and colonization. So it was taught to us. Okay, and we also understand that in 1492 he sailed to America. Who? Columbus, who was sponsored by this because it was Renaissance in Europe, and there was explorations. People were discovering sea routes to have trades, and later on, behind the motives of these trades were colonization. So first they established trades with different parts of the world, and then they made colonies. So it was Renaissance period in Europe, and because of this Renaissance, which was the age of exploration, so people went away from their homes. So these people, some European, they reached to Asia, Africa, right, different parts of the world. So they also wanted to have like some sea routes to India, and the Spanish or the Spain sponsored Columbus to discover sea routes to Asia, to India, to have trade with them. And Columbus reached to Central America, Caribbean, and he did not know that he discovered a new world. Later on, after his death, we know that where he reached, it wasn't Asia, it was actually a new land, a new world, that was America. It is taught to us in school, college, or historian books because of the last impact of European on the world history. So that's why that the Viking, they have been skipped away from this scene. So, Western Hemispheres and European explorations and colonization. However, Columbus' achievement, as monumental as it was a term of world history, is monumental. That's why that we are taught about Columbus, not about Vikings. So, wasn't the first European arrive in America? Oh, he wasn't the first who arrived to America, because before him there were Vikings, right? So, in fact, Columbus never even reached the mainland of what we know called the United States or North America, because he reached to Central America, Caribbean. Instead, he landed on the island in Caribbeans, and including present day Hispaniola or Haiti or Dominicans Republican. So what we know that he reached to Haiti or Dominican. Fine, these were the Caribbean states where he reached for the first time. Here you can see the image of Christopher Columbus. Columbus' significance lies in the fact that he connected the old world, Europe, Africa, and Asia to the new world. That's why that it is historian and the history books and the scholars, they tell us about Columbus, not about the Viking, because it was through him, the Europe, the Africa, and the Asia are connected with the New World America in a way that led to lasting contact, trades, and eventually colonization. So because of Columbus or because of these European voyages, we can see colonization in America. That's why that we do not taught in history about the Viking. But in fact, these were the Viking who reached for the first time on the land of America, that was North America. Now, his voyage marked the beginning of sustained European exploration, but they were not the first instance of Europeans' presence on the continent. So we can say that Columbus' voyage marked the beginning of sustained European exploration, sustainable European exploration. Because then there were other people who reached to America and they discovered other parts of America. But we can't say that he was the first European who reached to America. Before him, the Vikings were theirs. The Viking early explorers in the America. You might know this person because I took this image from the Viking Valhalla. That was a series on Netflix, right? And you might know about this character. His name is Leif Erikson. So to challenge the popular narrative of Columbus as the first to discover America, we need to take a step back and look at the Viking, who were in fact the first known Europeans to reach North America. So Vikings were the first one, right, who reached America for the first time. And you might know this character, Leif Erikson, also in this Viking Valhalla, and we know that he was in those Viking who reached to North America, right? So remember, this is a new perspective on world history. Again, you can see the image of Leif Erikson here. Around 1000 AD, right? So we might say 11th century. Leif Erikson's a Norse explorer from the Greenland. Greenlander, you might know that the name was given in that movie to him, Greenlander. So he was from the Greenland, is believed to have sailed westward across the North Atlantic. So he reached America through the North Atlantic. Where? To North America. Who? Leif Erikson, a Viking. So he and his crew likely landed in what is now Newfoundland, Canada, right? He reached to Canada. That time it wasn't Canada, but today this Newfoundland was called Canada. This was nearly 500 years before Columbus reached to America. Almost 500 years before he reached to America. Okay, his crew. So Erikson's settlement in Vinland, as he called it Vinland, was documented in two major sages. The sage of the Greenlanders and the sage of Eric the Red. So we know this sage as the sage of the Greenlanders and the sage of Eric the Red. Now, the sages describe how Erikson sailed from Greenland and made land fall in the place he named Vinland or Vineland, which is believed to have been along the northeastern coast of North America, possibly in modern day Newfoundland. Now, archaeological evidence from the sites at Les Anse Aux Meadows discovered in 1960. It was the second half of 20th century on the northern tip of Newfoundland, provides strong evidence that Norse explorer did indeed reach the continent. The continent. So this site contains a remnants of Norse settlements, complete with tools, buildings, and other artifacts consistent with Viking exploration. So we know from the tools, we know from the building, and we know from the artifacts, we know from that there was some settlements according to archaeological studies or archaeological evidence tell us, right, that there was the settlement, and in those settlements we know from the buildings, we know from the tools, we know from other artifacts that were similar to the Vikings they used. So that's why we say that before the arrival of Columbus, people who reached there, they were the Vikings, right? Now, this discovery is significant because it shows that the Viking not only reached North America but also established a short-lived settlement. So they did not reach there, but they also settled there for a short time, but not for a long time, and there were no colonization. That's why they have been skipped away from the history. Unlike Columbus, whose voyage led to lasting contact with America, the Viking settlement at Vineland was abandoned after a few years. So they faced conflict with indigenous people, what we call them indigenous Americans, and their efforts were limited due to the logistical challenges and the inhospitable environment. So they did not stay for a long time because of what? Due to the limited logistical challenges they faced with the indigenous people of America or American people, the real American people, and the inhospitable environment because they had the first combat or conflict with indigenous Americans. Evidence of Viking explorations. Archaeological findings, the site at Alans Ox Meadow is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and is considered clear evidence of Norse activity in North America. Now, excavations uncovered Norse-style building tools and iron articraft that could not have been made by indigenous people. So after excavations digging out what? This digging excavations uncovered North style building. The buildings existed there after their digging, after the excavation. They found out there were some building which were North style. There were some tools and iron articraft used by the Norseman. That's why they say, archaeologists say that the people existed and perhaps they were the Norsemen. Now, Viking sages and the oral tradition. Now, the Norse sages provide compelling account of voyages to the west. Now, though some of the detail may have been exaggerated over time, their consistency with archaeological evidence support the idea that the Vikings were indeed the first European to reach North America. So what we know that they reached for the first time to North America from archaeological studies. The significance of Columbus voyages. So if the Vikings were the first European to discover America, why do we still celebrate Columbus? The answer lies in the impact of his voyages. So this is a very important question, that if for the first time the Viking, the crew led by Leif Erikson, right, in perhaps in 1000s AD, then why do we celebrate or why do we relate the story with the Christopher Columbus in 1492? This is the question, because then we can say that because of the impact of his long-lasting effects. So while the Viking brief foray into North America did not lead to sustained introductions or colonization. So it wasn't like the Viking, Leif Erikson, or the Viking who made a way or who gave a way to colonization. Or we can say that a sustained interaction between Europe and America. But it was the voyages of Columbus who made this way. So that's why that we celebrate Columbus, not the Viking. Had lasting global consequences. Now, Columbus' 1492 journey was the first to establish a continuous large-scale exchange between the Old and the New World, what historians often refer to as Columbian exchange. It was because of Columbus we can see exchange in trade, in interactions, and then later on colonization. So this exchange of goods, crops, animals, and ideas between America and the Europe dramatically altered the course of the world history. So it wasn't the Viking which altered the world history, but it was the Columbus and his crew which altered the world history in the term or in the shape of the trade, in the shape of the goods, in the shape of ideas, and in the shape of colonization. It was Columbus and these European explorer in the end of 15th century. So colonization, Columbus' voyage opened the foot gates for the other European explorer and colonizer, and particularly from Spain and Portugal, to establish settlement across America. So it was Columbus which opened gates for other European, right? Like Portugal, Spain, and then later on we can see English that who made settlement there and made colonies. So cultural exchange, Columbus' discovery also brought new agriculture products such as potatoes, maize, and tobacco to Europe, while Europeans introduced horses, wheat, and other crops to America. So we can see that the long-lasting effect of this voyages made by Columbus. So that's why that we consider him the first one. Otherwise, he wasn't the first one. Now, these exchanges had profound consequences for both the America and the Europe, leading to centuries of explorations, conquests, and colonization. Then later on, we can see that in 16th century there were colonization of the French and the Spain and the English, and they settled there. A historical revision, the true discovery of America. So the debate over who discovered America is more than just a question of who reached its shore first. We can't say, okay, we can say that who reached the shores of America first. It's about recognizing the complexity of history. So the Vikings reached North America long before Columbus, but their settlement were isolated and did not result in long-lasting contact. What can we say? That the Viking reached North America long before Columbus, but their settlements were isolated and limited because they faced some challenges from the indigenous people, and they did not have some logistical support, so that's why they did not stay for a long time, and they did not have long-lasting impact on America. Who? The Viking. Otherwise, a Viking were the first one. Columbus, while not the first European to reach the America, but opened the door for sustained contact between the continent and setting the stage for the era of colonization and reshape the world history. So the term discovery is itself problematic because it ignored the fact that Americas were already inhabited by millions of indigenous people long before any European arrived. So for these people, the arrival of European marked a time of great upheavals, colonization, and exploitation. So the term discovery is itself controversial because when you say discovery, so something did not exist before. But when we say that Columbus discovered America, so there were millions of people, indigenous people of America, who were already living on this land. So it's a controversial, but we can see that when European arrived there, so these people, the indigenous people, they were then made colonizers. So arrival of European marked the time of great upheavals, colonization, and exploitation. Then these Europeans, they exploited Americans, and they exploited the land of America, and they did what? They made colonies, and they were colonized. There were great upheavals in America, North America, South America, Central America. So we can conclusions, so a new perspective. In conclusion, the question of who discovered America is not just about pinpointing the first European to arrive on the continent. It's about understanding the broad context of explorations and colonization. So when we say that who discovered America, so we are not just talking about that who reached the shores of America first, but we are talking about the broad context of explorations and colonization. So exploration occurred after Christopher Columbus. Colonization occurred after Christopher Columbus. Trade occurred after Christopher Columbus. Ideas exchange occurred after Christopher Columbus. Right? So we can see these all after the arrival of Christopher Columbus. The Viking, with their remarkable voyages in the 10th and 11th centuries, were indeed the first European to reach North America. However, Columbus' voyage in 1492 had far-reaching consequences, laying the foundation for a new era of global interactions, explorations, and colonization. So we sum up that the first people who reached to America, North America, to the shore of America through Atlantic were the Vikings. And these Vikings were led by Leif Erikson, right? Somewhere in 10th and 11th century. But they did not stay there for long because some challenges they faced, logistical support, inhospitability, and combat with the indigenous American. Now, then in 1492, when Columbus, he reached America without knowing that he reached America. So after his voyage right? What happened? He opened the gates for other European to reach to America and made colony. So then there were interaction between Americans, North America, South America, Europe, and Africa, and there were trade, there were explorations, and we can see there were also colonization. So the long-lasting impacts on North and South and Central America we can see in the form and shape of Christopher Columbus. But he wasn't the first who reached the shore of America first. It was Vikings, right? Leif Erikson crew. So he reached for the first time, but impact, long-lasting impact on America, that was after the reaching of Christopher Columbus. So thank you so much. It was a detailed lecture. We learned that was about that who discovered America. So the notion you might have learned in school or college, like me when I was student, when I was teacher. So I taught such history to the students that America was discovered by Columbus. But it's true in terms of long-lasting impacts and in terms of explorations, instructions, and colonization. But it's not true in terms that he was the first who reached America for the first time. Thank you so much. Please do provide your valuable comment about today's topic.